Thom Hartmann here on the news. You need to know this. It's not even Election Day yet, and we're already seeing the effect of Republican efforts to restrict the vote. It was voting chaos in Florida over the weekend as voters tried to cast their ballots early. Nightmarishly long lines at polling places forced voters to wait in line for as many as 9 hours. At one polling place, more than 180 voters had their cars towed away while they were waiting to vote. This is all the result of Republicans in that state legislature deciding to cut down the number of early voting days this year from 14 to 8. Republican Governor Rick Scott rejected calls to keep polling places open longer to accommodate the influx of voters, but he refused, saying that only a natural disaster would warrant extending voting hours. On Tuesday, more chaos is expected as fewer polling places will be open around the state than in 2008, thanks to budget cuts. Similarly long lines were reported in Ohio, where Republican Secretary of State John Husted also cut down on early voting hours. There are many ways to rig an election. Cutting down on early voting is just one of them. Stay tuned. In screwed news, another way to rig an election is to blatantly mislead voters. That's exactly what Republican candidate for Senate in Arizona, Jeff Flake, is doing. According to local news outlets, Flake's Senate campaign sent out a mass robocall to Democratic voters in the state, telling them to vote in the wrong precinct. Of course, if a voter casts a vote in the wrong polling place, their vote doesn't count. The campaign has yet to comment on whether it was a mistake or an intentional effort to sabotage the Democratic vote. The Arizona Senate race is one of a handful in the country that is too close to call and could tip the balance of power in the Senate. The stakes are high, and Republicans will resort to anything to win. In the best of the rest of the news, so just how much of a freak show is this election? Well, thanks to Citizens United, outside spending groups have dumped nearly $1 billion into this election so far, which is more money than outside groups have spent in the last 8 federal elections combined. And it's the Republican Party that is benefiting the most from all this secret corporate cash. More than 2/3 of outside spending has gone into the coffers of Republican politicians. This will be the third major election since the Supreme Court's disastrous ruling. In the previous two, the 2010 midterm and the Wisconsin recall, big money has defeated organized people. That's why it's so important to make sure you vote on Election Day, or else big money will win again. Austerity may win out at the polls on Election Day, and if so, we should pay close attention to what's happening in Greece. Greek labor unions kicked off 3 days of anti-austerity action today, beginning with doctors, taxi drivers, and journalists walking off the job. Over the next few days, schools, tax offices, government buildings, and transportation services will be shut down across Greece as unionized workers walk off the job to protest austerity. The Greek parliament is expected to pass a new round of austerity measures this week that would cut pay and pensions for public workers and further sink Greece's economy. This is what austerity does. It crashes economies so the corporate predators can move in and feast on the commons. We here in the United States have been warned. Tax rates on corporations have been a hot issue this election. With 1 day to go, we're all getting a reminder that corporations aren't paying their fair share anymore. Apple, the most valuable company on the planet, paid just 1.9% on its overseas profits, according to new filing data. The company made $36.8 billion in the last fiscal year, yet paid less than 2% in taxes thanks to creative and legal accounting that funnels corporate profits through tax shelters in Ireland and the Caribbean. Hypothetically, if Apple did pay its fair share of taxes in the United States, its tax bill for 1 year would be more than double what Apple has paid in taxes over the last 11 years combined. Apple makes cool, high-tech gadgets, but they don't pay for any of the social services that allow those gadgets to even be possible. There's a word for that. It's called freeloading. And finally, people aren't just looking to get elected on Tuesday. There are important ballot measures up for a vote as well. Perhaps most important is Prop 37 in California, which will require all genetically modified organisms, GMOs, to be specifically labeled in grocery stores. Despite polls showing overwhelming support among voters for that measure, it's a toss-up as to whether or not it'll get passed tomorrow. That's because major agribusiness and food companies like Monsanto have spent huge amounts of money misinforming voters about the legislation. These companies have spent more than $45 million to defeat Proposition 37, more than 5 times what supporters of Prop 37 have spent. While most of Europe has already banned most GMOs, here in the United States, 70% of the food on our grocery stores' shelves contains GMO products, and most Americans are completely unaware of it. Hence the need for labeling. This will be another test case of organized money versus organized people. We Americans should have a right to know what's in our food. For some reason, corporations are trying to keep us in the dark. Could that reason be profits? And that's the way it is today, Monday, November 5th, 2012. I'm Thom Hartmann on the news.